You think you are choosing him, but if you are not conscious, it is your unconscious that is choosing for you. And when a woman does not know how to see through the mask of a man beyond his 35th year, she risks giving her soul to a figure who will consume her, drain her, and leave her carrying his shadow as though it were her own. Do not take this lightly. If you choose wrongly, you will spend years entangled in the same pattern. A man who cannot face his own demons will force you to carry them. You will find yourself bound to his bitterness, trapped in his unspoken disappointments, and burdened by his unlived life. You will feel yourself shrinking, apologizing, explaining, while the years vanish, and at the end of it, you will look into the mirror and whisper, "Where did I go?" This is the danger. When a man has crossed into midlife without confronting his unconscious, without making peace with his shadow, he projects it into the woman beside him. You become the battleground for his failures. You become the object of his resentment. And if you are blind, you will mistake this poison for love. But if you listen carefully, and you learn what I will show you, the opposite can be true. You will see through the mask before it binds you. You will recognize the signs of a man who has faced his shadow, who carries the weight of his years with integrity. Such a man does not drain you, he awakens you. He does not bury you in his unlived life, he walks beside you into your own. This is what you will gain if you stay: the wisdom to discern anima from animus, projection from presence, possession from partnership. You will learn how to recognize when you are being chosen by your unconscious rather than by yourself. You will learn how to walk away from men who would devour you and how to remain with those who can help you grow toward wholeness. I will tell you plainly, if you drift through these words, nothing will change. You will repeat the same pattern year after year until the pattern itself breaks you. But if you listen as though your very life depended on it, because it does, you will no longer be prey to the shadow of another. You will be free to choose wisely, and that choice will determine whether you walk into ruin or into your own becoming. Part I, the hidden crisis of the midlife man. There comes a moment in a man's life, often unannounced, when his achievements turn to dust in his hands. The applause that once sustained him grows hollow, the possessions that once defined him lose meaning, and a silent unease takes root within his soul. This moment rarely occurs before 35. It is not a crisis of circumstance, but of being. The ego, swollen with success or labor, begins to crack under the weight of its own emptiness. This threshold is the most dangerous and the most sacred time in a man's development. For at 35, the first half of life is ending, and the second, concerned not with ambition but with meaning, begins. Few understand this shift. The man senses it as restlessness, fatigue, or boredom, but it is the soul's demand for transformation. The shadow, long repressed beneath striving and control, rises like a ghost demanding recognition. Many men, frightened by this stirring, flee from it. They drown the whisper of the unconscious in work, in pursuit of power, or in the distraction of new conquests. They call it vitality, but it is flight. They redouble their efforts in the outer world to avoid facing the inner. Their eyes remain fixed on horizons of achievement while the ground beneath them trembles. This is not life, it is evasion, a refusal of the psyche's call to depth. A man who has reached this turning point but refuses descent begins to live a half-life. His laughter grows forced, his conversation brittle. He mistakes cynicism for wisdom. The fire of youth hardens into bitterness. This is the uninitiated man of midlife. He grows older, but not deeper. Time thickens around him like armor, protecting him from the world but suffocating his soul. I have often said that life's first half is governed by expansion. One builds, conquers, and establishes identity. The second half demands the opposite: contraction, introspection, the return to origins. The tragedy of many men lies in their refusal to surrender the weapons that once brought them victory. They continue to fight old battles in new decades, mistaking movement for meaning. Yet inwardly, they feel the futility of their own war. It is at this point that women are often drawn into their orbit. They mistake the gravity of such men for depth, their silence for serenity. Yet beneath the calm exterior lies despair. The man over 35, uninitiated into his shadow, radiates a subtle hunger. He seeks in woman the vitality he has lost in himself. His soul, unable to renew from within, reaches outward to feed upon hers. The woman senses this without knowing. His composure fascinates her, for it seems to promise stability. She does not yet see that what he calls peace is merely exhaustion. His charm lies in the tension between outer confidence and inner fracture. He becomes the image of the old king, whose crown still gleams though his kingdom lies in ruin. She kneels before him, not realizing that he himself has long been dethroned. The archetype of the old king recurs through myth and history. Once he ruled with wisdom, but as his vitality wanes, he clings to authority rather than surrendering to renewal. He fears the new life rising beyond him, the youthful impulse, the unknown future, the feminine principle that threatens his dominion. And so he grows cynical, ironic, dismissive of all that stirs. His power curdles into control, his insight into judgment. A man who resists the transformation of midlife becomes possessed by this decaying king within. His laughter carries contempt, his eyes look backward. The woman beside him becomes his subject, his mirror, or his scapegoat. Her vitality reminds him of his own decline, and so he unconsciously resents her. Every unacknowledged failure in him becomes accusation in her presence. The love that once joined them turns into quiet hostility. When a man cannot confront his own shadow, he projects it into the woman he loves. She becomes the container for his unlived life, the repository of his guilt and longing. He sees in her both the purity he admires and the chaos he fears. He alternates between idealization and rejection, drawing her close only to push her away. Thus, she becomes the battlefield upon which his inner war is waged. Many women mistake this conflict for passion. They sense the heat of his unrest and believe it intensity. They tell themselves they can soothe him, redeem him, heal his pain. But one cannot heal another's shadow. It belongs to the soul's private labor. A woman who takes up this task enters the labyrinth of his unconscious and risks losing her own. She becomes the priestess of his despair, offering sacrifices that will never be enough. It is essential to understand that midlife itself is not the problem. It is the refusal of initiation that poisons the heart. When a man crosses this threshold consciously, he becomes wise. When he crosses it blindly, he becomes bitter. The years do not make him mature. They make him heavy with unintegrated experience. Time does not heal what consciousness avoids. It festers beneath the mask of competence. I have observed that those who awaken to the inner call at midlife undergo a symbolic death. They relinquish the image they once lived for the successful man, the lover, the leader, and face the emptiness that remains. This death is frightening, but it is the price of renewal. Only when the old identity disintegrates can the self emerge. But most resist this death. They cling to illusion, demanding from others the vitality they refuse to find in themselves. The crisis of the midlife man, then, is not that he ages, but that he mistakes aging for failure. He mourns the loss of youth without realizing that the soul now seeks wisdom. If he cannot shift from outer conquest to inner depth, his spirit decays. He becomes what I call the uninitiated elder, a man old in years but adolescent in soul, seeking validation rather than meaning. The woman who meets such a man must learn to see through the mask of experience. Do not assume that gray hair brings insight or that confidence means wholeness. Look instead for integration, the quiet dignity of one who has faced his own darkness. There is a gravity in such men, but it is not heaviness. It is calm born of inner reconciliation. The difference is subtle but unmistakable. One drains energy, the other bestows it. The uninitiated man's speech betrays him. He speaks of the world with disdain, of love with irony, of ideals with fatigue. He uses humor to mask disappointment and intellect to avoid feeling. He believes he has seen through life when in truth life has passed through him unseen. Such a man is not yet ready for love demands humility before mystery, and he has mistaken disillusionment for knowledge. Every woman must learn to discern this hidden despair. To pity it is dangerous, to romanticize it, fatal. The man who has not faced his shadow will make you its vessel. He will burden you with his unlived grief, expecting you to mother what he refuses to mourn. You will feel yourself shrinking, apologizing for his bitterness, growing weary without cause. These are the symptoms of carrying another's unconscious. But if you can perceive this crisis as revelation rather than flaw, you may learn much. His behavior exposes the wounds of an entire generation of men, those who were taught to build but not to feel, to act but not to reflect. You will see how society itself conspires to keep men from initiation, praising success while scorning introspection. This understanding will give you compassion without blindness. Do not condemn him. Recognize his struggle as the universal human drama. the ego's resistance to the self. Yet do not join him in avoidance. Your task is not to rescue, but to see. For to see is to awaken, and awakening breaks the chain of unconscious repetition. When you discern the crisis for what it is, you step out of its contagion. Midlife can destroy or transform. For the man who listens, it is the doorway to wholeness. For the one who resists, it is the slow suffocation of the soul. The woman's wisdom lies in distinguishing these two. You cannot save him from himself, but you can save yourself from illusion. Learn to hear what time whispers through his gestures. Look for depth, not charm, integrity, not eloquence. The first lesson is this: do not trust years, trust integration. A man's age tells you nothing. His consciousness tells you everything. The years may have carved lines upon his face, but only reflection carves light into his soul. Ask not what he has achieved, but what he has suffered and understood. For it is suffering, not success, that reveals the quality of his spirit. And if he has not suffered consciously, if he has merely endured without meaning, then his pain will seek you as its container. He will need your vitality to remember what he lost in himself. To love such a man without awareness is to become nurse to his unconscious. But to see him clearly, to recognize the threshold he stands upon, is to preserve your soul from his unfinished descent. Part 2. The Mask of Maturity, How He Hides His Shadow. The man beyond 35 learns quickly that the world reveres appearances. He has survived long enough to understand that society rewards the image of control, not the substance of consciousness. And so, when the storm of his inner life begins to rise, he conceals it behind a well-crafted mask. He learns to wear competence as armor, intellect as weapon, and composure as disguise. This is how the mature man hides his chaos. The cultivated persona of the older man is impressive. He knows how to appear calm while trembling within. His voice carries conviction, his gestures assurance, his gaze the weary wisdom of experience. Yet beneath these gestures lies a quiet dread, the fear that his inner emptiness might one day be exposed. What the world sees as dignity may, in truth, be paralysis, the stillness not of peace but of suppression. Every man builds a persona, a necessary interface between himself and the collective. But when the persona hardens into identity, it becomes prison. The man who lives too long behind his mask forgets the face beneath it. He begins to confuse imitation with authenticity, role with reality. He speaks fluently of his principles, yet his words no longer reach his heart. He has become a statue carved in his own likeness, lifelike but lifeless. Many such men pride themselves on rationality. They trust thought over feeling, method over mystery. They will tell you that they have learned restraint, but their restraint is fear in disguise. They have not mastered emotion, they have merely buried it. Beneath the surface lies a sea of unwept tears, anger unexpressed, tenderness unacknowledged. Their intellect shines because it stands atop a grave. To the untrained eye, this restraint appears as strength. Women are especially vulnerable to this illusion. They sense in the older man a gravity that seems to promise safety, yet that gravity is often stagnation. His calm attracts because it contrasts the restlessness of youth. But what she interprets as depth may be simply depletion, the stillness of a pond where nothing grows. In truth, the older man's composure often conceals an unhealed wound. It is the mark of years lived without reflection. His achievements stand as monuments to avoidance. He has mastered outer order at the expense of inner harmony. His success is not proof of integration, but compensation for the fear of failure. The more decorated the mask, the greater the emptiness it hides. Listen carefully to how he speaks of his past. If he recounts it with pride untempered by humility, he has not yet met his shadow. If he speaks of former loves with contempt, he has not yet faced his own inadequacy. If he dismisses the emotional life as folly, it is because he has not dared to enter his own. The mask of maturity becomes visible only when you watch not his gestures of strength, but his avoidance of weakness. The subtle arrogance of experience is perhaps the most deceptive mask of all. He believes that having seen more of life, he has understood it. But true understanding humbles, it does not harden. The man who truly knows becomes softer, not sterner. He speaks with compassion, not condescension. When a man's experience has not awakened empathy, it has served only his pride. Status, intellect, and control, these are the symbolic armors of the unintegrated elder. They are not evil. They are fragile defenses against a terror he cannot name, the fear of insignificance. He senses, though dimly, that all his efforts to shape the world have not granted him meaning. The shadow whispers that his life has been a performance, and he silences it by tightening the mask. But the silence of the shadow is never peace, it is the stillness before collapse. At times, his inner conflict leaks through the cracks of his composure. It appears as sarcasm, as the quiet contempt of one who mocks what he secretly envies. He may scoff at idealism, dismiss faith, or sneer at tenderness. Each act of disdain is a confession. His cynicism reveals what he has lost, not belief in others, but belief in himself. His irony is the armor of despair. Beneath his competence lies loneliness. The man who has built his identity upon control cannot bear true intimacy. He fears that to be known is to be diminished. His relationships remain cordial but sterile. He can provide, protect, advise, but he cannot surrender. The woman beside him may feel safe, yet she feels unseen. She stands before a wall disguised as a man, solid and cold, without a door through which love may pass. In the stillness of night, however, the mask begins to slip. He wakes without knowing why, heart pounding in the darkness. The silence presses upon him. He remembers faces from the past, choices once dismissed, tenderness withheld. Dreams return irrational, vivid, filled with forgotten desires and nameless fears. They whisper of what he has buried. But he turns away, reaching instead for distraction. These nocturnal hauntings are the psyche's rebellion. The unconscious does not forget what consciousness refuses. Each dream, each unexplainable sadness, each moment of inexplicable anger is a summons to return to the soul. Yet most men interpret these symptoms as weakness. They strengthen their armor, boast of stoicism, and return to the world as though nothing has happened. The persona grows more polished, the man within more lost. To the perceptive woman, the tension between mask and being is palpable. She hears it in his laughter, too loud and too brief. She sees it in his eyes, where confidence flickers into vacancy. She senses it in his silence, not meditative but defensive. Her intuition feels the chaos beneath the order. Yet if she is unconscious, she will romanticize this contradiction. She will call it mystery when it is misery in disguise. When a man's inner life is unexamined, his charm is dangerous. His composure tempts the woman into believing she has found solidity, but what she has found is stagnation. The relationship begins with admiration and ends with suffocation. For no woman can breathe in the atmosphere of denial. His control over himself becomes control over her. His repression infects the bond with lifelessness. But for the conscious woman, such men serve as mirrors. They reveal how easily one can mistake control for consciousness, surface for soul. She learns to look beyond posture and rhetoric, beyond what he claims to be. She listens not to his achievements, but to his hesitations. She watches how he reacts to vulnerability in himself and in others. His response tells her everything, whether she stands before a man or before his mask. When his calm conceals cowardice, you will feel it. There will be no warmth behind his eyes, no true presence in his touch. His words will sound practiced, as though spoken from memory. He will avoid the raw and the uncertain, preferring polished abstractions. The mask of maturity always avoids what cannot be controlled. His composure will feel like distance, his intellect like a wall. But when the calm arises from consciousness, it feels altogether different. His silence is not absence but depth. His confidence is not armor but faith in the process of life. He is not defending himself from feeling, he is anchored within it. Such calm does not drain but restores. The difference lies in whether the mask hides or reveals the soul. To discern this, one must watch for the smallest signs, the tremor in his voice. When he speaks of pain, the humility with which he admits ignorance, the gentleness with which he receives contradiction. The mature man no longer clings to being right. He desires only to be real. The false elder insists upon his superiority. The true one listens as though the world still has much to teach him. The world worships the mask, but the soul worships the truth. The woman who would not be deceived must learn to see through appearances. The mask of maturity can be seductive, for it promises safety in a world of chaos. Yet safety purchased at the cost of soul becomes imprisonment. You must dare to see what lies behind the composed exterior, even if it means shattering an illusion you long to believe. Every mask eventually cracks. For some men, it happens through illness. For others, through loss or failure. When the persona shatters, the man is forced into confrontation with what he has hidden. Then begins his true initiation. But if he clings to the fragments of his old identity, He becomes caricature, the elder who mocks what he once loved, the man who grows older without ever growing human. It is not cruelty to perceive this truth, it is compassion, for only through seeing clearly can one awaken both oneself and others. The woman who sees the mask for what it is, without hostility, becomes mirror, not judge. Her awareness invites authenticity. If he can meet her gaze without retreat, he may yet begin the descent he has long avoided. To see the mask is to glimpse the man's potential for rebirth, for behind every persona lies the longing for authenticity. The soul does not wish to remain hidden forever. It conspires toward revelation. The woman who recognizes this dynamic serves life itself. Her vision becomes the spark that may awaken him, or the light by which she safely departs, leaving him to his own destiny. And so, learn this: the mask of maturity is not wisdom. The true measure of a man lies not in what he conceals, but in what he has dared to face. The years will tell you nothing. Consciousness tells you everything. Look not for composure, but for vulnerability held with dignity. That is where the real man begins. Part 3: The Unconscious Woman and the Disillusioned Man. There is a strange magnetism between the unintegrated man and the unconscious woman. They are drawn to each other by forces neither understands, each carrying within them what the other lacks. He carries unacknowledged shadow, she carries unclaimed intuition. Their meeting feels like destiny, but it is often the unconscious seeking to complete its unfinished pattern through the other. When such a man meets such a woman, the chemistry is immediate and profound. He senses in her a vitality that he has long lost. She feels in him the authority and stability she secretly doubts in herself. She believes she has found a soul of depth, while he believes he has discovered renewal. But their union, if unconscious, becomes a trap, for what attracts them are not their strengths, but their mutual wounds. The woman, sensitive to emotional currents, perceives the ache within him, the silent disappointment, the exhaustion beneath his competence. Her heart responds not with reason, but with instinct. She feels called to nurture, to heal, to redeem, yet this calling is rarely spiritual in origin, it is psychological. She is responding to an inner pattern, the archetype of the healer, which disguises her own need to feel indispensable. The disillusioned man welcomes her care. At first, her tenderness soothes his fatigue. He confuses her empathy with salvation. For a time, he feels revived, alive once more in the reflection of her love. But this renewal is borrowed. It does not come from within him. Slowly, he grows dependent upon her vitality, her emotional richness, her capacity to feel. She becomes the vessel through which he experiences his own denied soul. This dynamic has the appearance of intimacy, but it is parasitic. The woman gives of her energy until she grows weary, while he feeds upon it without realizing. She believes she is helping him grow. He believes she completes him. Neither sees that they are maintaining each other's unconsciousness. The man avoids his shadow through her devotion, and she avoids her own autonomy through his need. The hidden resentment begins quietly. She senses his inertia, his resistance to self-examination, and feels the burden of carrying the relationship's soul alone. What she once called love begins to feel like labor. He, in turn, senses her growing disappointment and withdraws further, ashamed yet defensive. The tenderness that once united them turns into silent reproach. Both feel betrayed, yet neither understands by whom. It is at this moment that the psyche begins to revolt. The woman's dreams grow vivid and unsettling. She sees symbols of confinement, locked rooms, heavy chains, stagnant water. These images reveal what her conscious mind denies, that she has imprisoned herself in her own compassion. Her love, once a gift, has become servitude. Her nurturing has turned into a form of bondage that the soul can no longer sustain. Every woman must one day face this truth. The desire to heal what another refuses to confront is not love, but possession by an archetype. The unconscious woman, believing herself selfless, is in fact driven by a hidden fear of her own abandonment. By healing him, she hopes to secure her place in his world. By keeping him dependent, she ensures he will not leave. But love rooted in fear cannot nourish the soul. It merely postpones awakening. The man, meanwhile, grows colder. He begins to resent the very love that once sustained him. Her devotion reminds him of his own weakness. Her insight threatens his fragile sense of control. He withdraws, not from her affection, but from the mirror she holds to his unhealed self. His disillusionment deepens, and he may turn to work, distraction, or even cruelty to escape the gaze that sees too much. The woman experiences this withdrawal as betrayal. She does not yet realize that he cannot offer what he does not possess. The intimacy she craves from him requires a consciousness he has never cultivated. His heart is sealed by years of repression. She mistakes his incapacity for indifference. Her grief turns to anger, but even her anger binds her to him. To rage against him is still to orbit his unconsciousness. In this crucible, feminine rage emerges not merely as emotion, but as psychic event. It is the eruption of the soul demanding freedom. The woman begins to see that her suffering has meaning. Her anger, once directed at him, becomes recognition of how she has betrayed herself. She sees that her compassion became self-neglect, that her intuition was ignored, that her love turned her into a vessel for another's denial. This realization marks the first breath of consciousness. As she awakens, the man feels threatened. Her clarity exposes his stagnation. He accuses her of cruelty, of change, of becoming distant. He does not understand that what he calls distance is autonomy, and what he calls coldness is integrity. The unconscious man demands a woman who feels for both of them. The conscious woman insists that each carry his own soul. Thus, awakening often marks the end of the relationship. But the end is not failure. It is initiation. The woman's withdrawal from unconscious love is a rite of passage into selfhood. She begins to reclaim her projections, recognizing that the depth she saw in him was her own. She withdraws her anima energy from his shadow and returns it to the source, to herself. This act, though invisible, is the most powerful form of liberation the psyche can perform. The dreams that once confined her now begin to shift. She sees open landscapes, journeys, doors ajar. The psyche responds to consciousness with new symbols of possibility. The inner voices that once whispered guilt now speak with wisdom. They urge her not toward the man, but toward her own center. The same intuition that once led her into his labyrinth now guides her out of it. Still, the temptation to return remains. The unconscious binds through emotion as tightly as chains. She may feel compassion for his despair, longing for the man she imagined. But she must remember that compassion does not require captivity. To love him now would mean to join him again in his refusal of growth. To walk away is not rejection, it is respect for both souls. The disillusioned man, left alone, faces his own crisis. Without her vitality to sustain him, the emptiness he avoided rises at last. This is the moment when he may finally begin his own descent or double his denial. Whether he awakens or decays is no longer her responsibility. The psyche demands that each carry his own burden. Only through solitude does he have the chance to meet himself. The woman must resist the guilt that society imposes upon her for choosing freedom. Culture glorifies female sacrifice and mistrusts female discernment. Yet discernment is the essence of consciousness. To see clearly, even when clarity costs love, is to serve truth. The woman who learns this no longer confuses compassion with submission. She understands that genuine love cannot grow in the soil of unconsciousness. In time, she may meet the man again, perhaps years later, changed or unchanged. If he has awakened, their meeting will be one of mutual respect, not longing. If he has not, she will see it instantly. His charm will feel familiar but empty. The old spell will no longer hold, for she has withdrawn her projection. The pattern that once bound her has become transparent. The unconscious has lost its grip. What was once tragedy becomes wisdom. The woman who has lived through such entanglement emerges with eyes that see both herself and others. She understands now that love is not meant to complete, but to reveal. The man who could not face himself taught her to face herself. His refusal became her awakening. His shadow, once her prison, became her teacher. Thus, the relationship that began as unconscious bondage becomes the instrument of consciousness. Through it, she learns the difference between empathy and enslavement, compassion and self-erasure. She discovers that love without awareness is the most seductive form of illusion. Only through its failure does she learn what love truly is, a meeting of two souls willing to bear the light of truth, however painful. To separate empathy from captivity is the beginning of wisdom. The woman who accomplishes this becomes immune to the old patterns of suffering. She no longer seeks the wounded man to heal, for she recognizes the temptation as her own shadow. She honors her instinct to care, but she directs it first toward herself. Her tenderness no longer enslaves, it illuminates. Her compassion has become consciousness. Part 4. Signs of the Shadowed Man, over 35. A man's shadow grows heavier with age if he does not face it. In youth, the unconscious hides behind ambition and desire. Energy masks emptiness. But by the time a man crosses his 35th year, the disguises begin to fail. The eyes lose their brightness of purpose. The laughter grows thin. What was once drive becomes defensiveness. If he has not yet met his own depths, his shadow will begin to live his life for him. The signs of this are subtle, yet unmistakable to those who can see. The first is a quiet withdrawal from feeling, not serenity, but numbness. He calls it composure. He praises himself for restraint. But what he calls calm is actually the fear of collapse. He has sealed his heart to avoid its tremor. His emotions, once alive, now move beneath the surface like currents under ice. To feel would threaten the structure of control that holds him together. Emotional detachment is his proudest virtue and his greatest wound. He believes he has mastered himself, yet he has only amputated the soul. In truth, he fears the very thing that could redeem him: vulnerability. He cannot cry, not because he is strong, but because the dam within him has hardened into stone. The woman who senses this feels the chill of his silence, not peace, but absence. She feels unseen, not because he does not look, but because he no longer sees. Another sign is bitterness, the quiet resentment toward life itself. He may hide it behind humor, or sophistication, or intellect, but its flavor is unmistakable. It creeps into his words when he speaks of women, of youth, of men more passionate than himself. He dismisses enthusiasm as naivete, mocks innocence as foolishness. He confuses irony with wisdom. But irony is the weapon of those who have lost faith in meaning. Resentment is always the mark of unintegrated failure. The shadowed man resents what he has not dared to become. He resents the vitality of others because it reminds him of the life he abandoned. He resents the feminine because she mirrors his inner weakness. He resents the world because it refuses to conform to his disappointment. His bitterness is not directed outward but inward. Every sneer conceals a wound that has never healed. You will know him by his disdain for introspection. He calls it self-indulgence, weakness, or folly. He prefers control to understanding, order to truth. To look inward terrifies him, for he suspects that behind the mask of competence there lies a void. His fear of the unconscious is the measure of his distance from it. He is haunted by dreams but refuses to remember them. He seeks distraction in labor, in pleasure, in judgment, anything but silence. Mockery of emotion is another of his defenses. He cannot bear to witness genuine feeling, for it confronts him with what he has lost. When another cries, he grows impatient. When another loves, he grows suspicious. He calls sensitivity excess and tenderness weakness. What he condemns in others is what he cannot forgive in himself. His coldness is not cruelty, it is terror. The heart, once sealed, becomes fortress and tomb. Control becomes his religion. He organizes his life into predictable patterns, financial, intellectual, sexual. He believes that if he can master form, he will silence chaos. But the more he controls, the more the shadow rebels. The unconscious does not obey the ego's commands. It answers only to acknowledgement. And so, the man's need for order becomes obsession. His competence becomes rigidity. His authority becomes tyranny. He calls this stability, but it is the stillness of fear. Watch how he speaks of his past. If he idealizes it, he is clinging to a vanished image of himself. If he condemns it, he is fleeing from his own guilt. Both are forms of flight from the present self. The man who cannot speak of his past with tenderness has not made peace with it. He carries the ghosts of his younger self, and they haunt every love, every silence, every choice. In relationships, his shadow repeats itself with relentless precision. At first, he captivates with maturity, his poise, his knowledge, his restraint. But soon the pattern emerges. He withholds affection when vulnerable, demands admiration when insecure, withdraws when intimacy threatens him. His love oscillates between possession and distance. The woman who loves him feels she must constantly prove herself worthy of his warmth, yet the warmth never stays. It flickers like a candle in a draught. The cruel paradox of the shadowed man is that he both desires and fears the feminine. He longs for her vitality, her emotion, her capacity to feel, yet he cannot tolerate what she awakens in him. The moment she touches his depths, he retreats. Her love evokes in him the chaos he has spent years suppressing. He calls her too emotional, too demanding, too intense, never seeing that it is his own denied emotion reflected in her. This dynamic is as old as myth. He is the wounded king of the ancient stories, bleeding inwardly, unable to rule his kingdom because he has not healed his own wound. The feminine arrives as grail-bearer, offering healing through love, but he cannot receive it. The pain of his wound has become his identity. To surrender it would mean to die to who he has been. Thus, he guards his injury like a relic and calls it strength. In dreams, he may appear as a man wandering through desolate ruins, or as a king in a crumbling castle. The symbols are unmistakable. The structure of the old self decaying, the vitality drained. But instead of rebuilding from within, he blames the world for his ruin. He cannot see that the collapse is mercy, the unconscious demanding rebirth. Without humility, he mistakes his own transformation for persecution. At times, his charm becomes predatory. The same instinct that once sought union now seeks control. He learns to manipulate admiration, to feed upon the emotional responses of others. He becomes expert in evoking pity, guilt, or fascination. What was once charisma becomes cunning. The light in his eyes, once curiosity, now conceals calculation. He takes what he can from others to feel alive, but the life he steals fades quickly, leaving him emptier than before. The woman who stands before such a man must learn to recognize the moment when fascination turns to consumption. She will feel it in her body, a heaviness, a subtle fatigue after being with him, as though something within her has been quietly drained. This is the psychic exchange of shadow. He does not take her energy deliberately. His unconscious does it for him. To remain unaware in his presence is to be devoured by projection. Yet judgment is not the answer. To see his shadow clearly is to understand the tragedy of the human condition. Every man contains this potential. The woman's task is not to condemn, but to discern. She must see that his arrogance is fear, his coldness is defense, his manipulation is hunger for soul. To pity him is useless. To understand him is liberating. Awareness does not heal him, but it protects her. When she recognizes these signs, she stands at a crossroads. She may remain, hoping her love will awaken him, or she may withdraw, preserving her light. The unconscious woman chooses the former, believing that love can substitute for consciousness. The conscious woman knows that each soul must meet its own darkness alone. To save him would be to rob him of initiation. To stay when he resists awakening is to share his sleep. If she leaves with awareness, she becomes mirror rather than martyr. Her departure may become the very event that forces him to confront himself. Deprived of her vitality, he may finally meet his shadow. This is not guaranteed, many men never do, but the possibility exists. Life, in its strange wisdom, often uses separation as instrument of awakening. The spiritual task for the woman is therefore not to change him, but to see him truly. Each shadow recognized is one less power over her. Each projection withdrawn restores her strength. She learns to read the signs of possession, the bitterness, the coldness, the need for control, not as mysteries to solve, but as warnings from the psyche. Her discernment becomes her protection. Her seeing becomes her salvation. The man over 35 who has not faced himself is dangerous, not because he is evil, but because he is asleep. His unconscious drives, unacknowledged, rule him from within. He may wound without intending, consume without noticing, destroy without malice. The danger lies not in his will, but in his blindness. To engage him unconsciously is to risk being drawn into the same sleep. But there is also hope, for shadow is not the enemy, it is the threshold. Should he ever turn toward his own darkness with humility, his vitality would return tenfold. The bitterness would transform into compassion, the control into presence, the cynicism into insight. The same forces that destroy him now would become the sources of his wisdom. Yet none can walk that path for him. He must descend of his own accord. The woman's wisdom, then, lies in patience without delusion. She must see the potential, but not sacrifice herself to it. The choice to awaken must be his. Her clarity is the only light that can guide him, and even then, he may not follow. But whether he does or not, she remains free, for consciousness, once attained, is irreversible. To see the shadowed man is to see life in its unfinished state, the divine spark still buried beneath centuries of habit, pride, and fear. To meet him consciously is to remember that all human love is an alchemy of darkness and light. The woman who perceives this no longer fears him. She honors his struggle, but she guards her soul. And in that act of sacred discernment, she fulfills her own initiation into wisdom. Part 5. The man who has faced himself. There is a rare kind of man whose silence does not conceal fear but peace. He has gone into the night of the soul and returned with eyes that no longer evade truth. He does not speak of transformation because he has lived it. His strength is not display but stillness. His authority not domination but understanding. Such a man has faced himself, and in doing so, he has reconciled the war between his ego and his soul. This man did not reach wisdom through theories or through success, but through suffering. Life stripped him of his illusions, sometimes brutally. He lost what he thought he could not live without, and yet he lived. He discovered that the ground of being does not vanish when the ego falls. It is revealed. This discovery gives him the calm that no achievement can provide. He has met his shadow, wrestled with it, and instead of denying it, he befriended it. He is no longer at war with his darkness. He knows that evil and good are not absolutes in human nature, but opposites that seek union in the self. He has ceased to divide himself into light and shadow. He recognizes both as necessary for wholeness. The result is not perfection but authenticity. His flaws are visible, but they are integrated. He does not hide his weakness. He holds it with dignity. This humility is his true strength. His humility was not chosen, it was forced upon him by life. At some point, the old structure collapsed. The success, the admiration, the certainty. In that collapse, he discovered that everything he had built rested upon illusion. He realized that control is a myth, that suffering is not punishment, but initiation. When he ceased fighting his fate, he began to listen, and what he heard was not condemnation, but the quiet voice of the soul calling him home. Through this descent, the anima, his inner feminine, awoke within him. No longer projected onto women, she became his inner companion, his guide through the labyrinth of feeling. He began to dream differently. The women in his dreams no longer appeared as temptresses or saviors, but as wise figures, carrying symbols of transformation, water, fire, and light. Through them, he learned to feel again. The soul of the feminine within him taught him compassion. This man no longer fears emotion. He knows that tears are not weakness but cleansing, that anger, once faced, transforms into clarity, that longing, once embraced, becomes prayer. His feelings no longer govern him, they guide him. He has ceased to judge them as good or bad. He reads them as messages from the depths. What was once chaos has become language. His unconscious no longer sabotages him, it collaborates. He does not seek to conquer the world, for he has discovered that conquest is sterile. He seeks to live in harmony with truth, whatever form it takes. He no longer demands certainty. He honors mystery. He walks with the awareness that the line between knowledge and ignorance runs through every human heart. His morality is not borrowed from convention, but born from conscience. He acts rightly, not because he fears consequence, but because he feels unity with all life. When you meet such a man, you feel the difference immediately. His presence is steady, not imposing. He listens with attention that is not tactical but compassionate. His eyes do not search or judge, they rest. In him, there is no need to prove, no desire to impress. His words carry weight because they are rooted in lived experience. He speaks less, but when he speaks, the world seems quieter, as though making space for truth. He is not without desire, but his desire no longer enslaves him. He can love without needing to possess. His passion does not burn to consume, but to illuminate. The woman who loves such a man feels not drained, but expanded. In his company, she senses herself more vividly, as though his understanding grants her permission to exist fully. He awakens what is highest in her because he has made peace with what is lowest in himself. This man's relationship with a woman is not a conquest, but a communion. He no longer seeks in her his lost soul. He meets her as one soul meets another. His love does not flatter, it reveals. He does not promise happiness. He offers reality. To stand beside him is to stand before a mirror that neither distorts nor flatters. He demands no transformation, yet his presence transforms, for he evokes in others the same integrity that governs his own life. He is not perfect. No human being is. He grows weary, he falters, he doubts. But he no longer fears these moments. He has learned to rest in imperfection. When darkness visits him again, he greets it as an old teacher. He no longer flees from pain. He asks what it has come to teach. This attitude gives his life an atmosphere of grace. He radiates calm, not because he is untouched by sorrow, but because he has made peace with it. His laughter is gentle, without mockery. His humor does not belittle, it restores perspective. He no longer ridicules what he does not understand, for he knows that ignorance belongs to all. He has ceased to compete, for competition is the refuge of those who have not yet met their own value. Instead, he contributes. His ambition has turned inward into craftsmanship of soul. Whatever he does with care, for he understands that form shapes spirit. This man no longer divides life into sacred and profane. He finds meaning in the ordinary, in work, in silence, in presence. His spirituality is not proclaimed, but lived. He finds the divine not in abstraction, but in the gesture of kindness, the word spoken in truth, the patience of listening. He no longer needs to appear spiritual, for he has seen that the divine hides precisely where the ego refuses to look, in the small, the humble, the human. Because he has faced his mortality, he no longer wastes life. The awareness of death has purified his attention. He lives as one who knows that every encounter may be the last, and this gives tenderness to his love. He does not hoard time. He sanctifies it by being fully present. In his company, one feels the rarest gift, the sense of being seen without being possessed, known without being diminished. He does not demand devotion. He evokes it naturally. People trust him, not because he seeks their trust, but because he lives transparently. He admits his errors without shame, for his worth no longer depends on perfection. He forgives easily because he understands the frailty of human nature. His forgiveness does not excuse, it liberates. To be near him is to remember that goodness is not a virtue to be displayed, but a fragrance that arises when the soul is whole. To love such a man is to love the human condition itself. He does not pretend to be savior or saint. He stands as fellow traveler on the road of transformation. He offers neither safety nor illusion, but companionship in truth. He does not fix the wounds of others. He helps them find the courage to face their own. In his love, there is both warmth and challenge, the tenderness of one who has suffered and the strength of one who has survived. Yet this man is rare, for few endure the descent required to become him. Many begin but turn back at the threshold of pain. Those who continue discover that death of ego is not the end, but the beginning of freedom. To the world they may appear ordinary, even unnoticed, for the soul makes no noise. But the sensitive will recognize them. They carry an invisible light, born not of ambition, but of having died and lived again. Women must learn to discern this light. It is not glamour, nor charisma, nor eloquence. It is the quiet radiance of one who has accepted both heaven and hell within himself. Such a man cannot be possessed because he belongs to life itself. He is neither tyrant nor child, neither ascetic nor hedonist. He is a vessel through which the opposites flow and find peace. To stand near him is to feel one's own soul awakening to the same possibility. If you meet such a man, you will know. His words rest in silence. His eyes hold no demand. He will not promise to make you happy, but he will never make you small. His love will challenge your illusions, but it will honor your being. In him, you will recognize not perfection, but wholeness, and through that wholeness, you will remember what love was always meant to be, not escape from the self, but return to it. Part 6, the woman's choice, conscious love or unconscious repetition. Every woman reaches a moment of reckoning, a point at which her soul demands that she choose between awareness and the familiar sleep of repetition. It is not the man who decides her fate, but her own consciousness. The man may be shadowed, radiant, kind, or cruel, yet the true question remains: does she see, or does she refuse to see? This is the turning of her destiny. The unconscious always seeks repetition. It clings to what is known, even when that known is suffering. The woman who has been bound to wounded men before will, without awareness, find them again. The faces will change, but the pattern will not. For the psyche returns to its unfinished lesson until it is learned. Thus, the danger is not the man himself, but her blindness to the archetype he embodies. The moment she awakens, however, the pattern begins to lose its power. When she recognizes that her attraction is not love but compulsion, she severs the invisible thread that binds her to repetition. This recognition is painful, for it means the death of illusion. The fantasy of rescue, of fusion, of completion through another, dies. But in that death is the first breath of freedom. The choice is rarely dramatic. It happens in silence, in the space between one heartbeat and the next. She sees the familiar signs, the charm laced with sadness, the authority that conceals hunger, the admiration that asks for worship. She feels the pull, the same pull that once drew her into years of entanglement, but this time something within her hesitates. Her intuition, once ignored, now speaks with quiet insistence. Not again. To resist this pull requires immense courage, for the unconscious speaks with the voice of longing. It promises ecstasy, belonging, and destiny. But what it truly offers is the return to captivity. The woman who walks away does not do so lightly. She walks away trembling, grieving the death of a dream. Yet every step she takes toward consciousness restores to her the strength she once surrendered. This is not the renunciation of love, but its purification. Love that is unconscious seeks to possess. Love that is conscious seeks to understand. In the old pattern, she gave herself to men who could not see her, hoping to be seen. Now she sees herself, and therefore no longer needs to be consumed. The woman who sees no longer trades her soul for attention. She gives only from fullness, never from hunger. It is here that many falter. They confuse compassion with surrender, forgiveness with permission. They tell themselves, "He needs me, I cannot abandon him." But a man who refuses his own darkness cannot be helped by another's light. The more she gives, the more he will take, until her empathy becomes enslavement. The unconscious calls this love. Consciousness calls it sacrifice without meaning. To choose consciousness is to endure solitude. There is an emptiness that follows the breaking of illusion, the silence after the storm. Yet that silence is sacred. It is the womb of renewal. In it, she learns to hear the voice of her own self, which speaks not in seduction but in clarity. For the first time, she feels her own presence unmediated by another. It is not loneliness she feels, but the vastness of her own being. In that stillness, she begins to see men differently. The traits that once bewitched her now awaken caution. The charm that dazzled her now feels forced. The authority that once impressed her now reveals insecurity. Her discernment grows sharper. She no longer confuses dominance with strength or mystery with depth. What once excited her now warns her. Consciousness has changed her taste in love as completely as fire changes metal. Yet awareness does not make her hard. True discernment softens the heart. She can look upon the wounded man with compassion without surrendering to him. She understands that his suffering is his path, not her calling. She can care without carrying. This is the essence of differentiation, the ability to feel deeply without becoming lost in what one feels. Her compassion has matured into wisdom. This maturity transforms attraction itself. The unconscious seeks fusion, the conscious seeks reflection. When she loves now, she does not seek completion but communion. She no longer loses herself in the other. She meets him from the center of her own being. Love becomes not an escape from solitude, but its fulfillment. She learns that to share her life does not mean to dissolve it. But consciousness demands vigilance. The old patterns, though weakened, still whisper. The psyche remembers the intoxication of unconscious love, and sometimes she longs for its intensity. The quiet peace of awareness can feel dull in comparison to the storm of projection. She may yearn again for the dangerous man, the one whose shadow mirrored her own. This yearning is the final test. To endure it without regression is to seal the work of transformation. She must remind herself that what she called passion was often possession, and what she called devotion was often fear. She must remember the exhaustion that followed each surrender, the loss of self that accompanied each illusion. Memory becomes her teacher, not her tormentor. Every recollection of pain becomes a warning light on the path, reminding her that to love unconsciously is to return to bondage. The courage required to walk away from illusion is not the courage of defiance, but of faith. Faith that love, when it comes in truth, will not demand her diminishment. Faith that solitude is not a void, but a vessel being prepared. Faith that what the unconscious once sought in suffering, the self will one day reveal in peace. This faith is not naive. It is the deep trust that life is intelligent, and that love, when true, serves the growth of the soul. There is a profound transformation that occurs when a woman ceases to mother the man she loves. Until that moment, her love remains bound to archetype. she is not truly loving him. She is attempting to redeem the masculine principle through him. But once she relinquishes that illusion, her love becomes clear. She sees him not as child to be healed, nor as God to be worshipped, but as man fallible, separate, complete within his own destiny. When she ceases to mother, she becomes mirror. Her presence reflects truth. She does not flatter his ego, nor indulge his denial. She stands before him as consciousness itself, and this challenges him more than any criticism could. Some men will flee from such reflection, others will awaken, but whether he flees or awakens is no longer her concern. Her task is to remain true to her own seeing. To reject illusion is not coldness, it is reverence for truth. The unconscious calls rejection cruelty because it measures love by attachment. The conscious soul knows that love and truth cannot be divided. The woman who refuses to participate in falsehood honors both herself and the man, for she gives him the only chance to meet himself in reality. Her no may wound his ego, but it serves his soul. This is the threshold of transformation, when love ceases to be refuge and becomes evolution. To love consciously is to invite growth, not comfort. It is to allow the other to be free, even if freedom leads them away. The woman who has reached this awareness no longer fears loss, for she understands that nothing real can be lost. Love that depends on blindness is illusion. Love that survives truth is eternal. Every choice between consciousness and repetition shapes destiny. The woman who chooses awareness steps out of the cycle of inherited suffering. She no longer reenacts the fate of her mother or the unlived desires of her ancestors. Her life becomes her own. The energy that once fed old patterns now fuels creation, art, insight, service, peace. The soul, once trapped in repetition, begins to sing. Thus, the woman's choice is not only personal, it is archetypal. Each conscious act of love contributes to the collective healing of the feminine principle. Each refusal to serve illusion liberates the world a little more from the shadow of unconsciousness. The courage of one awakens the possibility for many. Her decision, quiet and unseen, becomes part of humanity's gradual redemption. So remember this: to choose awareness over repetition is to choose evolution over comfort. It is to trust that love, when purified of illusion, becomes a path to the divine. The woman who makes this choice may walk alone for a time, but she will walk in truth. And truth, though it costs every false comfort, is the only companion that will never betray her. Part 7. The sacred relationship, when both are awake. When two souls meet who have both endured the labor of self-confrontation, the atmosphere between them is unlike ordinary love. There is no intoxication, no trembling illusion, no fever of need. Their union is not born of hunger but of recognition. They do not meet to complete one another, but to reflect wholeness back to itself. This is the sacred relationship when man and woman love not from unconscious desire, but from the clear light of consciousness. Here, the man has faced his shadow and made peace with it. The woman has reclaimed her projections and learned to see. Their meeting is not the fusion of two half-beings, but the dialogue of two complete ones. They move toward one another, not to escape solitude, but to sanctify it through shared awareness. The space between them becomes luminous. It is not filled with possession, but with reverence, as though a third presence, invisible yet palpable, moves among them. Such love is not without passion, but its passion burns clean. It is not the consuming fire of projection, but the steady flame of truth. The erotic and the spiritual, long divided, are reconciled here. For the conscious man no longer fears the feminine within him, and the conscious woman no longer fears her power. Their union becomes alchemy, the meeting of eros and logos, body and spirit, matter and meaning. Conflict, when it arises, no longer threatens the bond. It becomes the crucible of growth. Each disagreement is seen not as betrayal, but as revelation, a chance to witness the hidden corners of the soul. They do not seek to win against one another. They seek to understand what the self is trying to express through their tension. The relationship becomes living psychology, the daily practice of seeing, feeling, and forgiving. When both are awake, solitude is no longer exile. They can stand apart without anxiety, knowing that absence does not diminish presence. Each values the other's inner life, understanding that communion depends upon individuality. Their togetherness is spacious. There is room for silence, for solitude, for the private dialogue between each soul and the divine. They no longer suffocate one another with closeness, for they have learned that love breathes in distance as much as in touch. Their eros, freed from possession, becomes sacred play. It carries tenderness and depth, but also freedom. It is no longer a means of proving worth or gaining control, but of honoring the mystery of being. They recognize in one another the eternal dance of masculine and feminine, the archetypal rhythm that sustains creation. The body, once burdened by projection, becomes temple. Desire becomes prayer. To live such love demands constant awareness. The shadow, though integrated, is never vanquished. It waits for inattention. The man must remember his humility, the woman, her discernment. They must continue to see one another as symbolic beings, carriers of mystery, not objects of possession. Their love, to remain sacred, must remain conscious. When it becomes routine, it withers. When it is worshipped, it burns. It must be lived daily as an act of truth. They know that to love is to risk pain, for no consciousness abolishes the human. They will hurt and misunderstand each other. They will fall into shadow and return to light. But their awareness turns even suffering into meaning. Their wounds no longer separate them. They deepen their bond. They forgive easily, for forgiveness is no longer a concession, but an understanding that imperfection is the price of incarnation. In their companionship, conversation becomes a form of communion. Words no longer serve to impress, but to uncover. They speak honestly, without strategy. There is no manipulation in their dialogue, no hidden agenda. Their speech flows from essence to essence. When silence falls between them, it is not absence but fullness, the stillness after truth has been spoken. Even silence becomes dialogue. Their relationship heals not only themselves but the collective. For every conscious union between man and woman reconciles the ancient split between spirit and matter. The masculine learns tenderness without losing strength. The feminine gains independence without losing love. Through them, the archetypes themselves evolve. The world, though unaware, is nourished by their harmony. They do not parade their love as virtue, for they know how fragile awareness is. They protect their union from the noise of the world. It is not secrecy that guards them, but sacredness. They understand that what is holy must be shielded from profanation, not through isolation, but through reverence. They live quietly, radiating integrity rather than explanation. In their daily life, sacredness expresses itself through simplicity. He labors not for conquest, but for service. She gives not from duty, but from joy. They act with care, knowing that every gesture participates in the rhythm of the soul. There is tenderness even in disagreement, humor even in weariness. Their partnership has ceased to be performance. It has become art, the art of being human together. Each becomes midwife to the other's becoming. He encourages her descent into the depths of intuition. She strengthens his ascent toward clarity. They exchange not roles, but energies, until both are balanced. In their union, the feminine no longer fears to express wisdom, and the masculine no longer fears to express feeling. Through them, the eternal opposites live in dynamic harmony, each completing and challenging the other. This relationship is not immune to loss, for impermanence is the law of existence. But when separation comes, whether through change, time, or death, it does not destroy. For what has been made conscious cannot be undone. Their love, purified of possession, transcends the form that once contained it. They part not as enemies or victims of fate, but as travelers whose paths have crossed in divine timing. Their gratitude endures where passion once burned. Such love cannot be planned, only prepared for. It arrives when both have faced their solitude, when each has learned to dwell within themselves without fleeing. Then the meeting becomes inevitable, as if life itself orchestrates it. They recognize one another instantly, not through excitement, but through peace, as though something ancient in them murmurs, finally. When both are awake, love becomes service to something greater than two individuals. It becomes the living presence of the self in the world. Their relationship mirrors the eternal union of opposites, heaven and earth, light and darkness, consciousness and instinct. Through them, the cosmos remembers its balance. The sacred relationship is not personal achievement, but participation in divine order. And yet, even in its sacredness, it remains profoundly human. They argue, they tire, they falter, but their awareness transforms each imperfection into revelation. They do not strive to maintain an image of harmony. They strive to remain honest. In this honesty lies their sanctity. They know that to live truthfully is the highest form of devotion. Such unions are rare, but they are possible wherever two souls have the courage to see. They do not depend upon perfection, but upon willingness. The world does not need more lovers. It needs more witnesses, men and women who have faced themselves and can therefore see one another without distortion. When two such beings meet, love becomes the mirror in which the divine gazes at itself through human eyes. This is what all the myths of sacred marriage have always pointed toward, not the romance of idealized union, but the birth of consciousness through love. When two are awake, they become the bridge between worlds, between the visible and the invisible, the temporal and the eternal. Their love ceases to be personal. It becomes symbolic. Through them, life remembers its purpose, to know itself. In such a relationship, even pain becomes prayer. Each misunderstanding becomes an offering to truth, each reconciliation a hymn to the mystery of being. Their love, purified of illusion, becomes the light that guides others toward their own awakening. They do not preach, they simply live, and their living is enough to awaken those who still sleep in the dream of unconscious love. Part 8. The woman who chooses wisely. To choose wisely is not to choose with caution, but with consciousness. The wise woman does not guard her heart behind suspicion. She guards it with understanding. She has walked through illusions and learned what they cost. She has felt the exhaustion of giving her soul to men who could not hold it, and she has carried the silence of awakening alone. Wisdom has been carved into her by loss, not granted by fortune. Her discernment is her crown, earned in darkness. She no longer fears men, for she has seen them truly not as saviors or enemies, but as mirrors of the human condition. She knows that every man carries both light and shadow, and that to love him consciously is to see both without denial. Her eyes no longer blur with projection. She no longer falls in love with potential, nor confuses intensity with depth. What once intoxicated her now reveals itself as warning. Illusion has lost its sweetness. When such a woman meets a man, she does not evaluate him by charm or power, nor by the tenderness of his words. She watches for substance. She listens not only to what he says, but to what his silences reveal. She senses whether his strength rests upon humility or pride, whether his calm conceals repression or peace. She feels whether he can meet her as soul or only as shadow. Her intuition, once clouded by longing, now serves as the clear compass of the self. Her choice no longer arises from hunger but from fullness. She does not seek to be completed, she seeks to be met, and if no such meeting appears, she does not despair. She has learned that solitude is not absence of love, but its preparation. In solitude, she converses with her own depths, where the divine speaks without words. She knows that the man who cannot honor her silence cannot honor her soul. This woman does not confuse discernment with pride. She does not dismiss vulnerability. She embodies it consciously. She can open her heart fully because she trusts herself to close it when truth demands. Her boundaries are not walls, but gates that respond to awareness. She has learned that love must be both tender and disciplined, that mercy without clarity becomes self-betrayal. Her love now has structure. It is not indulgence, but devotion to what is real. When she encounters the unintegrated man, she no longer takes his shadow personally. She recognizes his projections as signals, not invitations. If he worships her, she sees that he has not met his own anima. If he fears her, she knows he fears his own depths. She neither inflates nor shrinks before his confusion. She stands firm in her being, allowing him to see himself if he can, and if he cannot, she departs quietly without bitterness. To walk away wisely is an act of love, love for truth, for destiny, and for both souls involved. She no longer stays to prove her strength or to earn love through endurance. She knows that suffering unchosen is often unnecessary, and that to preserve peace is sometimes to leave. Her departure is not rejection, but reverence, reverence for the sacredness of the inner life, which must never again be sacrificed for the illusion of belonging. When she chooses to remain, it is not out of fear or pity, but out of resonance. She stays only where growth is possible. The man beside her must walk his path consciously, not perfectly, but willingly. She no longer demands enlightenment, only honesty. She can accept imperfection when it is met with humility. What she cannot abide is blindness, disguised as certainty, possession disguised as love. Her presence becomes mirror and medicine. She does not correct or coerce, for she knows that each soul awakens at its own pace. Instead, she lives her truth so clearly that it reveals falsehood by contrast. Her calm provokes honesty, her integrity summons authenticity. Those who stand near her begin to see themselves, for her very being reflects light. The wise woman heals not through effort but through presence. Her past no longer haunts her, it instructs her. She looks upon the men she once loved, the wounded, the avoidant, the arrogant, the kind but unready, and she feels gratitude. Each was a teacher, each a mirror, each an initiation into deeper awareness. She no longer divides her past into victims and villains. She sees now that life itself orchestrated every meeting for her evolution. She forgives not out of sentimentality, but out of understanding. Gratitude has replaced resentment. She blesses the years she thought were wasted, for they were the furnace that forged her clarity. She blesses the heartbreaks, for they broke the shell of illusion. She blesses even her mistakes, for through them the unconscious became visible. Her wisdom is not abstract, it is embodied memory transformed into light. She no longer regrets what was, she carries it as nourishment for what is. The woman who chooses wisely no longer defines herself by relationship. Love, for her, is not achievement but expression. She gives not to secure her worth but because love is her nature. Her work, her art, her friendships, her solitude, all become vessels through which her soul flows. She has ceased to divide her energy between loving and living, for to her they are the same. Her very presence changes the world around her. Those who meet her feel a strange quietness, a sense of being seen without judgment. She listens with the kind of attention that makes others remember themselves. Yet she asks nothing in return. Her strength lies not in control, but in containment. She can hold space for others without losing herself within them. She has become the embodiment of the conscious feminine, grounded in love, yet rooted in discernment. She teaches not by words, but by being. Young women sense her wisdom and draw near. She does not lecture, she reflects. She tells them that love without awareness will always end in awakening through pain, and that awareness, though lonely at first, is the beginning of peace. She reminds them that to see truly is the only protection, and to love truly is the only salvation. Her voice carries the weight of lived truth, and thus it liberates. In her maturity, she no longer strives to change men or the world. She tends her own soul, and through that tending, transformation occurs naturally around her. Her life becomes a quiet revolution. Each choice she makes from consciousness, each refusal to play old games, each act of truth alters the field of the collective psyche. The feminine principle, long suppressed, awakens through her being. She lives now in harmony with paradox. She knows that love and loss, joy and sorrow, solitude and connection are not opposites but rhythms of the same song. She does not cling to happiness nor resist pain. Her heart has become vast enough to contain them both. Her wisdom is serenity, the stillness that comes from embracing life's contradictions without fear. To choose wisely, she has learned, is not to choose perfectly. It is to choose from awareness in each moment, to listen inwardly rather than outwardly, to align with the self rather than with expectation. Her life has become a continuous act of discernment, not judgment, but inner knowing. She trusts that what belongs to her will come without struggle, and what leaves was never meant to stay. In the presence of such a woman, love itself feels different. It is no longer dramatic, no longer devouring. It is steady, radiant, alive. She draws no attention to her wisdom, yet it permeates everything she touches. Men who meet her sense immediately that she cannot be possessed, she can only be met. Those who are not ready will retreat. Those who are will rise. Her gift to the world is her example, the embodiment of what it means to love consciously, to walk in truth without bitterness, to choose again and again from the center of the soul. She is not a saint, nor a goddess, but a human being who has become whole. Through her, the feminine has remembered its own divinity, not as myth or ideal, but as lived reality. She has learned what few ever do, that choosing wisely is not an act of fear, but of faith. Faith that truth is kinder than illusion. Faith that solitude is not exile, but initiation. Faith that love, when it arises from the self, does not destroy, but completes. And above all, faith that every choice made in consciousness aligns her life with the quiet, radiant order of the soul. Thus she walks through the world unhurried, unafraid, unbound. Her eyes see clearly, her voice carries calm, Her presence blesses silently. She no longer searches for meaning, for she has become meaning itself. And those who cross her path feel, for a moment, the possibility of wholeness awakening within them, as if their own soul whispers, "This is what it means to be alive and awake and free."